thanks. If you could move that, please, because I practiced with the other one, but this one's like... Thanks, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Giribaladari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Giribaladari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Thira Pranachari Yamuna Thira Pranachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Dhanavalabha Giribaladari Jaya Gopi Dhanavalabha Giribaladari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Pranajari Yamuna Tira Pranajari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Madhava Ki So reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 34. This is old. So it has 33 up there. What's this? What's the situation?
Forget about what's written there. Which verse did you prefer?
34. So I'll just read the verse loud. This is the chapter 13, as mentioned. Nature, the enjoyer of consciousness. We're reading from Bhagavad Gita, as it is, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya for the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. Yata prakasha yatyekaha kritsnam lokam imam ravi chetram chetri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata. Yata, as, prakashayati, illuminates, ekaha, one, kritsnam, the whole, lokam, universe, imam, this, ravihi, the sun, chetram, this body, chetri, the soul, tata, similarly, kritsnam, all, prakashayati, illuminates, bharata, O son of Bharata. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. Purport. There are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle spirit soul, although situated in the heart of the body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. This consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body, and as soon as the soul is passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent So similarly, just as we can deduce that if a car or a machine that normally contains a human being, thank you, is moving and animated, we can also see that if a human is conscious, that denotes or that indicates that there is a spirit soul inside that particular body. Does that make sense? So the body, so Lord Krishna says in this regard, yantra arudhini mayaya ishvara sarvabhutanu hrideshu yunatistati brahmayam sarvabhuteshu yantra arudhani mayaya. The living entities are my eternal fragmental parts. I'm directing the wanderings of all living beings who are seated as on a machine. So Krishna directly says this in Bhagavad Gita, that the jivatmas are situated in the machine. And he says, Hridesha Unatistiti. He says that there's not only the jivatma present in the machine, but there is also anyone know what it's called? The other one starts with P. Paramatma, Haribol. So the Paramatma is also present. So he is accompanying the living entity throughout the transmigration throughout the universe. So this eternal, inextinguishable spirit soul is transmigrating through so many living forms. And it will remain in that machine for how long? How long can it remain in the machine? Anyone want to give an answer? How long can the jiva remain in the machine? Till the machine is finished. Yeah, finished. So now there's a big race to get spare parts for the machine, no? So they're cultivating new human spare parts. But again, this is ignorance because they're missing the whole point of the human birth. So it will remain in the machine as long as possible. It will only leave the machine, Prabhupada describes, once the pain level, once the threshold of pain, of agony is so great that it can no longer remain. And we see, in these war films, just hang in there, Johnny, hang in there. And they see them, they're being overwhelmed with pain. Yeah. Johnny! And you just see they can't take it anymore. That's it. And at that point, they are forced out of the body. Although it depends on the living entity. So I think it was Geronimo. I don't know why I remember these things during Bhagavatam class. But Geronimo was a great Indian warrior, right? Famous word, Geronimo. When you jump out the window, you yell, Geronimo. Geronimo. So he was a great and brave Indian warrior. Apparently he was shot like 7 times or something. So he had and he kept on living like this. So depending on the pain threshold that the living entity can tolerate, then they can remain in the body longer. Interesting, huh? So sometimes, for instance, the living entity will be in so much psychological pain that they will commit suicide. Sorry, don't want to speak about suicide with kids. The pain is so great, it's too intense. So they've lost all their money, they've made all this money, and suddenly it's gone. They check their balance, it's gone. The share market has crashed. And so they crash out the window. So, because the pain is too great, the pain is too intense. So the living entity will remain in the material body as long as the body will house it, or it can tolerate the pain within the body. So sometimes it will voluntarily leave because the pain is too great, but most of the time it'll be involuntary. They don't want to go. They don't want to go. So they're hanging on to the life. So Prabhupada gives the analogy of a man begging the doctor for just a few more months so he could complete his plans. But what's the point of these material plans? So, or the joke, doctor gives him 6 months to live. He says, doctor, I won't even be able to pay your bill in 6 months. I said, okay, I'll give you 12. So, but the doctor cannot extend the time 1 minute. This is all Krishna's doing. Krishna's in control of the duration of life. So, therefore, it is incumbent upon the living entity to discover what is the actual purpose of this life. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now is the time for inquiry. Now is the time to understand. There is no optimal time. There is no optimal time in Krishna consciousness, whether one is married, whether one is a young student, whether one is retiring. There's no optimal time to make inquiries, to making serious inquiries into spiritual life. It really has to be taken seriously as soon as possible. But I don't know, I think in the Indian tradition they sort of emphasize it later in life. Is that correct? Spiritual life is emphasized later in life, generally speaking? Yes. Yes. So Vanaprastha like that? Vanaprastha, then I'll buy a Bhagavad Gita. I'll have a look at that. Unfortunately, we don't know. Prabhupada wasn't so much for that, though. Prabhupada was more, we should do this now, actually, because we don't know if we're going to make it to Vanaprastha, do we? No? So, and more, it's becoming uncertain whether we will make. So, in this way, what is old? What is the definition of an old man? You know this one from Prabhupada? Obviously, we're going to refer to Prabhupada. So, what does Prabhupada define as old? I knew you were going to. That's okay, Prabhu. That's all right. It was a bit dead on that side. Yes, correct, Prabhuji. So, old age means close to death. That's what it means. So I could be 25, but if I've got, if I've got a very late stage cancer, then I only have a few months to live. That's old. That's old. So, Atata Brahma Jignasa, therefore scripture says, now is the time. Now that you've acquired this human form. So, that's right. So, I was saying that now the illumination within the body is only commensurate with the sophistication of that body. So, therefore, the illumination within a tree is not as elevated, obviously, compared to that of a human or an animal compared to human, a dog compared to human, pig compared to human. So, although it has autonomy over its body, it has control of its body, but it cannot understand what is God. It cannot understand what is Krishna. It cannot understand what is the eternal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. It cannot understand what is the Yuga Dharma, what is our Dharma for this particular Yuga, for Kali Yuga, and it cannot understand Varnashram Dharma. So only the human form can understand this. It is only intelligible in the human form. So, therefore, it is considered a great benediction to be in a human form. Despite the constant fighting we have and quarreling in this age about people belonging to certain races, belonging to certain countries, and all the politics involved with that, it, in comparison to the good fortune from the perspective of the Bhagavad, from the perspective of Scripture, these differences are nothing. They're infinitesimal small. Because regardless of what form or what nationality you have, what trumps that by far is the fact that you have the capacity to understand all this spiritual subject matter. And after millions of births, it's inconceivable, really. Inconceivable. I mean, we say that so often, millions of years, millions of births. It's really inconceivable. It's actually like, and to come in contact with Krishna consciousness, to come in contact with a pure Vaishnav, is like winning a lottery in the grand scheme of things. Because when you think of so many bacteria, so many other living entities, small living entities, billions and trillions of living entities, they have no capacity. They have no access to this. So therefore, as Lord Nishadev, I believe he says, exhorts his sons that therefore you should practice tapasya. Therefore you should practice austerity and develop your Krishna consciousness and not live your life like hogs and dogs for the pleasures that are available for the animals and the stool eaters. Therefore it's considered tremendous waste. It's a tremendous waste engaging the human form in trying to devise the most opulent means for eating, sleeping, mating and defending. Because all these activities are automatic. These activities are automatically given to the lower species. So they enjoy on this level. So why should we endeavor so severely in order to create a more polished version of these four activities when we can focus our efforts, practice austerity, and develop supreme consciousness, and then as a servant of Krishna, and then in our next life enjoy eternally, and then not have to go through the tragedy of birth, death, old age, and disease. That we struggle for such a large part of our life just trying to get financially situated, and then there's one catastrophe or calamity after another, isn't it? So you get some money and then there's some disaster. Oh, I've got to spend money now. I just got it together. Now I have to spend it again. Or you just develop a nice relationship and something else happens. And so in this way we're, even if we are spiritually conscious, even if we are somewhat advanced and we know these things, still the tendency is there just through association with non-Krishna conscious living entities. It's so influential that they can pull our consciousness down. And in that way, we are affected by the collective consciousness as Carl Jung described it. But I was thinking today in preparation for this class that similarly, the collective consciousness, it's only just made sense to me what it is. It's like if we're born in Kali Yuga, in the West, or situated in the West, however we got here, it is a particularly materialistic consciousness as opposed to Bharata Bhumi, which is a lot easier for getting access to God consciousness. But simply by being in this atmosphere, that collective consciousness creates this Kali Yuga, this materialistic mindset, this demonic mindset, which is, practically speaking, devoid of Krishna consciousness. And it's getting worse and worse. Worse and worse. So more and more the atheists are trying to destroy God. And of course they can't destroy God physically, so how do they try to destroy God? Does anyone want to offer an answer? Any of our guests? How do you destroy God if you can't destroy him physically? Belief, and what's that belief? So belief and the what? How do we write these beliefs down? Yeah. So through culture, through philosophy, like that, right? So this is the assiduous attempt of the asuras, of the non-devotees, the atheistic materialist, which is pretty much, in the Western countries at least, that's pretty much the vast majority of people. So therefore they're trying to destroy God. This is actually profoundly atheistic. And often they will disguise themselves as agnostic. Oh, I'm just agnostic. But then as soon as they get a chance, they're saying there's no God, doesn't exist. So this is the collective consciousness into which we go out in the workforce every day if we're not working at home. And so this is what we have to deal with. And in this way, if it's surcharged with ignorance, if it is surcharged with atheism, it makes it even harder. And it profoundly influences the living entity to not look into spiritual life, to simply go with the flow, to go with what everyone else is doing. So there is very much a herd mentality. It's very much no one wants to stick their head out and do their own thing. No one wants to be ridiculed. This is a very deep-seated fear that we know that if we go too much against the herd, there's a big danger in that. Isn't there? There's a big danger going against the herd. I'm not talking about criminality or other antisocial behavior. But if you go against the herd, then there's a real fear that, hang on, I won't be able to get employed. I will perish, actually. I will perish. So that influence of collective ignorance is very powerful. And so it is the mission of the devotees of the Lord to combat this and to fight this ignorance. So a form of this ignorance is the idea that eventually we will be able to create man. And so this year in particular, there's great talk, a lot of hullabaloo about the artificial intelligence, which is predicted this year also to become very prominent, and that this is going to make many jobs obsolete, meaning there'll be no more jobs, or there'll be more and more. There'll be people dependent on the state as the consequence of less employment becomes available due to AI being able to replace people for much cheaper, because it all comes down to the bottom line at the end of the day in this materialistic culture. Whereas Prabhupada stated that you should never remove jobs if you can't replace them with something else. Right? So very practical. Very practical, really. Why would you make people unemployed? Then they have to become dependent on the other tax, not the state, but other taxpayers. So why would you do that? So to this end, Prabhupada predicted this will destroy, in particular, the United States. That unemployment will destroy America, ultimately. And we can see this is very, very close to happening. But to that end, they're creating AI. However, they still can't produce life. All this AI is ultimately dependent on the conscious entity programming it and giving it input. Moreover, this AI cannot reproduce itself without other living entities contributing. Whereas God has created millions of species that can reproduce and perpetuate themselves without extraneous help, without extra help to do that. So in this way, Krishna is far superior, no? Far superior scientist, far superior manufacturer. So they've been promising for a very long time that they'll be able to produce life from matter, but they still can't do it. AI is dependent on the conscious input of other living entities. It has to be programmed and they keep reprogramming it. And we know that's a fact, and we know that they wouldn't be able to cash in their checks, which they presented 50 years ago to Prabhupada when they said, no, we'll be able to make life from life. So still they haven't made good on that check, have they? They still haven't been able to produce life from matter. And so Prabhupada emphasizes in this purport that the living entity is actually conscious from the spirit soul. In other words, life comes from life, and life doesn't come from matter. But that aside, we are happy to debate and argue on all fronts of science, on cultural, on philosophical grounds. But really, our main focus is not so much how we got here, or why we're here, but what to do now. So that's really our focus. And so this way, Krishna consciousness is not just supreme in terms of philosophy, but it's also supreme in terms of cultural integration, in that we also have the means of deliverance. So not just the superior philosophy, but also the superior form of deliverance, which is the Vaishnava culture, which will eventually will be inculcated by the devotees of the Lord across the world. So as many towns and villages as there are on the earth, my name will be preached across the world. So this is inevitable. We don't have to worry about whether this is going to happen. This is predetermined by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the golden avatar, the incarnation of Lord Krishna, who appears especially not every Kali Yuga. It's only one in every 64. Prabhu? 1 in every 64 Kali Yugas. So it's actually rare that Lord Chaitanya appears. He doesn't appear in every Kali Yuga. Again, lottery ticket. Very lucky to be exposed to Lord Chaitanya's movement, which will eventually spread over the world. This is predicted by the Lord. So we could either ignore it, be impartial to it, or we can become an active player. We can become a hero for Lord Chaitanya and assist in propagating the most important mission. This is the most important missionary work. This is the most important philanthropic work. This is the most important altruistic work, because it can solve all the problems of mankind, which are going to become more and more evident in the next 10 years. People are going to realize that, hang on, we're going to become obsolete. And the elites are already thinking, how can we get rid of all these masses so we can enjoy more resources for ourselves? And so I think it's going to dawn on people, hang on, well, I don't want to become obsolete, I'm valuable. But for the materialist, people aren't valuable. Why? Because they're just matter, they're just chemicals, they're just replaceable. They have no value. To the atheist, other humans have no value, except how we can exploit them, except how much we can labor we can get from them. That is the value. That is the demonic mentality. And the more absent God consciousness becomes, the more hellish it will become in this regard. So, Hare Krishna, thank you very much for your attention and for being here today. Are there any questions or comments? No? Where are you from, Prabhu? Where'd you travel from? Munich. Oh, okay. Nice. Yes, Prabhuji? Comment? Yeah, so we are hoping that it won't get to the point where things get so bad that people will be desperately finding a way. That's not our desire. Our desire is to alleviate the suffering of the living entity. Para dukkhi dukkhi, pari dukkha, dukkhi, is the consciousness of the saintly individuals, that they despair actually a little over the plight of the conditioned souls who are suffering in the material world. That being said, if the Lord decides to use that as a mechanism to wake people up, then we will still chant Hare Krishna. So it is a very profound sleep. It's a very profound, the material nature is so expert. Maya is so potent that it's like if you've ever been in a deep sleep, like a nap in the afternoon, and you're really tired, and you just have that nap, that nice one, but it goes a little deeper than you thought it would. And you wake up and it's just misty almost. You've just lost orientation of time. How long was that nap? Was it half an hour? Was it 3 hours? I'm not sure. So material nature is like that. It's such a spell. It's such a potent spell on the living entity that they are asleep and they don't know it. So this is like sleepwalking. This is like sleepwalking when you're asleep and you don't know it. And that's the plight of the living soul under the spell of Maya. And so this is the formula for breaking the spell of Maya is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you very much.